Hello and welcome to Kilowatt. My name is Bodhi. My name is Bodhi and I am your host. I couldn't remember for the life of me just for a moment there how I started out this show, so I apologize. I'm so dumb sometimes. Anyway, welcome to Kilowatt. My name is Bodhi. I am your host. And guess what? Today, August 5th, is my 5th year anniversary doing this podcast. So it's Kilowatt's 5th year anniversary. Pretty insane. 252 plus a little extra episodes, 252 official episodes. So yeah, pretty excited about that. Normally we jump into the news, but I want to go ahead and thank our Patreon supporters because some of these folks have been here since the beginning. So I'm going to start with the OG Patreon supporters and work our way to the newer Patreon supporters. And that starts with James, Mark, Nate, Cameron, Don, Dale, Sierra, Chris, Chip, Karen, Ryan, Vanilla Wafer, Adam, Tommaso, Rolando, Elon Muskie, Bruce, Peter, Jessica Kirsch, Howard, Anthony, and Isaiah. Thank you again to all the Patreon supporters. And if you're not a Patreon supporter and you still support the show by telling a friend or possibly leaving a review on your favorite podcatcher or however you support the show, even if it's just listening, thank you very much. And all right, with that, let's go ahead and start the show. First thing, I should mention that this week, the news stories were awful. I'm just going to let you know right off the top. Not a lot of interesting news this week. I tried to pick out the most interesting news for you. But in general, the EV news this week was a bunch of empty calories. So let's go ahead and jump into it. First up, Ford has 120,000 reservations for the F-150 Lightning. And they mentioned that at their earnings call. So they can't lie on their earnings call. Otherwise, they get into a lot of trouble. And we'll learn more about lying and getting in trouble with the FTC at the end of the show. But before we do that, let's talk about the Nissan Leaf. The Nissan Leaf base model now costs $28,375. For that amount of money, you will get a 40 kilowatt hour battery that goes 149 miles. And in the United States, you can still get the federal tax credit on the Nissan Leaf. So that drops the price down to $20,875. But that's not the best part because honestly, I think the Leaf is a good car. It is not a great car when you consider how much it costs because at the price range that the Leaf is in, we should be up over 200 miles, at least 200 miles, in my opinion. But here's the best part. And this is where I think it makes a very compelling offer. You can lease it for $1,449 down or due at signing, I guess, and then $89 a month. And for that, you get about 10,000 miles a year. So that's not too bad, actually. A family on a budget could easily lease this car. Like a family on a tight budget could easily lease this car. This is also a really good option for people who don't drive long distances. They just want to putt around town, do their errands, and come home, or just a vehicle that you could drive back and forth to work. I think $89 is ridiculously cheap, which it is. Nissan must be having a hard time getting rid of these, but hopefully people will be lured in with this really good lease deal. Let's talk about Hyundai. They're launching an all-in-one EV and hybrid subscription service in the UK. This service is called the Hyundai Mocean. It's spelled Mocean, so ocean with an M in front of it. Now, I looked up how to pronounce this word, and Google didn't know, so that's what I'm going with, the Hyundai Mocean. I don't know what it means. Anyway, subscribers can have an EV or a hybrid delivered to them for a monthly fee. It doesn't say how long you can keep the vehicle, like are you putting it in your garage? The article didn't say that. But it does include insurance, maintenance, road tax, and repairs. Hyundai is doing something very similar here in the United States with the Hyundai Ioniq 5. The biggest difference being is that you can order, like if you wanted a Hyundai Kona one day, and then you wanted, for some reason, you're going on a really long trip and you wanted a hybrid because it made you feel better, you can order a Hyundai hybrid, and then you can get the Ioniq 5 another day. It's just kind of, it sounds like you can pick the car that best suits the needs that you'll need for your driving experience during that time. Now it's going to start at 339 pounds, which is 472 US dollars. I'm actually really curious, would this be something that you are interested in? I mentioned before that the Hyundai Ioniq 5 will have something similar. I think it's the $199 and $299 are the price for the Ioniq 5 subscription, but it includes insurance, maintenance, road tax, and repairs. Would a subscription service, whether it's this one or something that looks very similar to it, would this be something you'd be interested in? I'm actually really curious, because with the Hyundai Ioniq 5, for some reason I can't talk today, which I can't talk every day, so I guess it's fine. With the Hyundai Ioniq 5, I'm really tempted to do it. If the Cybertruck wasn't coming out, and with Tesla raising their prices, it'd be something that I would definitely consider, like strongly consider. What do you think? Email me, Bodie. So dumb. Bodie, BODIE at 918digital.com. Again, my mouth, my brain, they're not working lately. Jeez. All right, let's jump into our Tesla news. Lots of rumors this week, and I'm not going to talk about them because I don't know how much credence to give them. So we're moving along. I mentioned last week, but it's worth mentioning it again because I want you to get excited about it, as excited as I'm getting about it. Tesla AI Day will take place August 19th at 5 p.m. So we're going to get lots of crazy news, I'm sure, from that event, and I will chop it all up like I always do, and I will deliver it to you on a silver platter that Friday. This is kind of a rumor. The Tesla Model X Plaid has been seen driving around. It's not a rumor that it's been driving around. The rumor is that it's closer to release than we think. Last week, we talked about Tesla opening up the SuperCharger Network to other EV manufacturers. Now, I'm sure that this was done with the intent to further EV adoption. And of course, this intent is pure without any ulterior motives. Maybe. By opening up the SuperCharger network, Tesla may be allowed to tap into $7.5 billion from the U.S. infrastructure bill. Now, they won't get a full $7.5 billion, but they can get some of that money by opening up the SuperCharger network. But here's the problem, is the U.S. infrastructure bill, it's a lot like a ball, right? Imagine the U.S. infrastructure bill is like, it's a ball that isn't quite inflated. And you got two toddlers, and they're rolling it back and forth to one another. Most times, they're not getting it to the other side, and sometimes it's just getting thrown behind them. Like, that's where the U.S. infrastructure bill is right now. We kind of expected them to have voted on it by now, and it had passed, but it's not. The Republicans and Democrats are just rolling that ball back and forth with the grace of a toddler. So that's what I want you to imagine. That's what's happening here in the United States. Moving on, biographer Walter Issacson is writing a biography about Elon Musk. So if you're not aware, Walter Issacson is a really good author. He's written several biographies, including the one on Steve Jobs, Leonardo da Vinci, Ben Franklin, Einstein, Henry Kissinger, and he's written a bunch of other books in addition to the biographies. So that ought to be pretty good, because the Steve Jobs book I thought was very interesting. Panasonic is close to installing a new production line at GigaNevada, according to their financial results report. This new line will likely produce 2170 cells, although I wouldn't rule out 4680 cells. In any case, the more cells, the better. We need more Powerwalls and more electric cars, so bring them on. Now, I didn't mention this last week because it was a really big show, but I do want to mention it here. There's a new Tesla update, the 2021.24. Now, it has some cool features. The coolest one, as far as I'm concerned, is Disney Plus. Hands down, Disney Plus is my favorite streaming service. They have everything on there that I want to watch, all my nostalgic stuff, and some really cool new stuff like Loki and WandaVision, and the new Monsters Inc. TV show is really good. I'm an adult that loves cartoons. Anyway, right now you can stream Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, and Disney Plus on your Tesla. So that's pretty cool news. They also have car wash mode, which will disable the car windows, wipers, sentry mode, and parking sensor chime, which I'm sure is really handy when you're going through a car wash. I will say that most Tesla owners that I know and that I interact with on a regular basis would sooner be skinned alive than to take their car through a car wash. For whatever reason, and I'm not 100% sure why, but this is considered sacrilege in the Tesla community. And I know that an automatic car wash can damage your paint and create little swirls and all that stuff. I totally get it. But some people just, they have little kids and they just want to put their car through the car wash. Anyway, owners can now also auto save Tesla cam footage. You have to turn this feature on in the settings. I thought you could always do this, but apparently I was wrong. But this sounds like a really good update. Like, not full of like super mega features, but full of useful ones for sure. Now, I said I wasn't going to talk about rumors, but I'm going to talk about one because it's pretty credible. And that is that Tesla will start building a test version of the Model Y with the 4680 battery cells and the whole bit at Giga Texas next week. Now, again, this is a rumor, but I think this is a really credible rumor. So we'll see whether I'm right or wrong on this. And then a Tesla driver in Norway was intoxicated while he was driving his vehicle and he fell asleep. His Model S was in autopilot mode, so it's not in full self-driving mode, but autopilot. Autopilot didn't detect that the driver was paying attention, so at some point the system brought the car to a complete stop. Now, fellow motorists in Norway, they noticed that the man had fallen asleep, and like every good Samaritan, they pulled out their phone and they filmed this guy sleeping and driving. Now, eventually the car did come to a stop. The Tesla acted the way it's supposed to. Nobody was hurt. And again, the driver was not in full self-driving, but autopilot. And I hope, and honestly, I hope to God, that the people filming were not driving, because that's almost as bad as driving intoxicated, to be honest. But the reason why I'm talking about this is we hear all the time about people abusing autopilot and full self-driving, just using it totally irresponsibly. Well, this is a case. Let's pretend this guy wasn't intoxicated. Let's pretend he had a diabetic emergency and he was unconscious. This car saved his life and possibly somebody else's life. And honestly, I don't think that that can be understated. This car acted in a way to protect the driver and the people on the road by coming. It noticed that the driver wasn't paying attention and it came to a stop. That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing technology. And while the driver is deplorable in his actions, you have to applaud Tesla for putting this feature into their software. Because I have been on plenty of calls in my 18-ish years of service, full-time in the fire service, and over or close to 30 years in total as a volunteer. I have seen so many people families who have been wiped out by a drunk driver, and the drunk driver walks away without issue. I've seen drunk drivers driving their kids around and getting into accidents and hurting their children and themselves. What I'm trying to get to is these are needless deaths, and I don't ever want to see them happen again. And I think as far away as Tesla is, and they are pretty far away from having real full self-driving, they're taking the right steps and they're moving the right direction. Because this is an example of the car saving people's lives. And I don't want to overstate it, but it shouldn't be understated either, because we hear all of these stories about how, people using this technology irresponsibly and they're going to hurt somebody and how it's not ready and all those other things. So I think this is a good example of how the car did what it was supposed to do and saved lives. All right. That got a little heavier than I wanted it to. Let's talk about Nikola Motors. Many of you know that I was high on Nikola Motors in the beginning. Actually, I should rephrase that. When Nikola Motors first came out, I thought they were a little ridiculous. I thought they were a little bro-y. And I'm not into the bro culture so much. I find it off-putting. But as Nikola Motors grew as a company, I was like, well, maybe I'm being unreasonable towards this company. So I gave them a chance. And when I dug into the company, I was like, oh, they're really doing really cool things. They have the UTVs that are fully electric. They're building this semi with the hydrogen. Sounds cool. Sounds like cool technology. Trevor Milton, who's the CEO of Nikola Motors, he's the founder and former CEO, I should say, has been indicted on 3 counts of fraud. He basically lied about everything involving Nikola. Now, this all started out with a Hindenburg report. Well, let's be clear, it started way before that. But what kind of marked the downward trend for Nikola is this Hindenburg report that came out that said that basically they faked everything when it came to the Nikola one. It was basically rolled down the hill, and it was made to look like the vehicle was actually running when really it was missing a whole lot of parts. The infotainment system was incomplete. They basically had screenshots up there to make it look like it was running. Then came the Nikola Badger, which was a hydrogen pickup truck. There was no prototype built. He lied about that stuff. I had high hopes for this company. And it turns out I'm a dummy, and I was fooled by Trevor Milton and the other executives. The EV community, and more specifically, the Tesla community, had just been ripping Trevor Milton apart. And I thought a little bit of it was unfair. And honestly, some of it may have been unfair because most of the people talking on Twitter about Trevor Milton and the company really had probably never met this guy. And then on top of that, they probably knew very little about Nikola Motors, but I'll get into that more in a moment. Trevor Milton was charged with 3 counts of fraud, 2 counts of securities fraud, false statements about the company, which is basically lies, and wire fraud. If found guilty, Milton will need to forfeit all properties traceable to his offenses, including the $1 billion he got when Nikola went public. Joy Klinder at Tesla already wrote up a nice timeline of Nikola Motors' journey. So I'm going to put it in the show notes, but I'm also going to kind of read that here. In 2009, Trevor Milton launched D-Hybrid. The goal of this company was to convert existing semi-diesel motors into a hybrid. Now, I wasn't able to find any information about this company when I searched for it, but I'm going to guess that it was a hydrogen diesel conversion, or possibly it was like a hybrid electric diesel semi. I'm not exactly sure. But they were awarded a $16 million contract with Swift Trucking, which is a huge trucking outfit. And then D-Hybrid, in turn, was going to convert 800 trucks to whatever this hybrid technology was. Now, I did the math, and that's only $20,000 per truck. If you know anything about diesel motors, and I have, a fair amount of experience because the trucks that I drive have diesel motors, this is a really teeny tiny amount. I mean, it seems like a lot of money, $20,000, but in reality, that's not much of anything. That's a pretty small number when it comes to doing anything on a diesel vehicle or on a diesel motor. Like these are motors that cost, in some cases, like $80,000. These are not cheap motors. So Milton allegedly told investors that this Swift deal was worth $250 to $300 million. Turns out D-Hybrid wasn't able to fulfill their end of the bargain, and they were sued by Swift, which, big surprise. In 2014, D-Hybrid was sold to Worthington for $15.9 million. No word on how much Trevor Milton got in that exit, but $15.9 million. So you got to assume that he walked away with a couple of million at the bare minimum. In 2016, Trevor Milton founded Nikola Motors and announced the Nikola One hydrogen semi, claiming that it was fully functional. Now, I remember this back in 2016 because that's when I started my podcast, and that's when I thought, this Nikola Motors, this is like a little broy. I'm not into it. It's not my deal. All right, let's fast forward to 2018. Tesla has an event. They announced the Tesla Semi and the Tesla Roadster. Everybody is so excited. They're thrilled. Nikola Motors files a $2 billion lawsuit against Tesla, claiming Tesla violated Nikola One's patent design. And that includes the door, the way the door opens, the wraparound windshield, the look of the Tesla Semi. Here's where I thought that Nikola Motors made the Tesla community angry for suing Tesla, because I love the Tesla community and I consider myself to be part of the Tesla community, but we can be a little aggressive. And I thought maybe we had some sour grapes and they were gunning for Nikola. Plus, they named the company Nikola Motors, which, Tesla was already named well before that. Nikola does something really bold. They refunded all 11,550 vehicle deposits. This was done to prove that they don't need the money brought in from these deposits to operate. Now, the way I understand the deposits to work is they can't claim that as income or even use it. So, I don't know that was that big of a gesture. I don't think they're allowed to do that. I don't think they're allowed to use that money to build the product. I think they have to hold on to that money, and they can't use it until somebody actually buys a vehicle from them. But I could be wrong. If you know, let me know. Bodie, BODIE, at 91digital.com. Let's move to 2019. Nikola World. I was there. They showed off the Nikola 2. This vehicle looked fantastic. They had all sorts of parts laid out for people to look at. They had a bunch of vendors there talking about the products that they were building for Nikola. They had the jet ski, the UTV, the military UTV, the machine of death, which I had some problems with because this thing had claimed to have all sorts of crazy things that would make killing people easier, and I'm not down with that. Even when you're at war, you shouldn't make killing easier. Anyway, they showed off the Nikola Tray, which is their small semi, like for local deliveries and that kind of thing. Nothing you're going to sleep in. By the way, that thing was like made of cardboard. It was probably some sort of plastic, but it looked like cardboard. But the coolest thing that they had there, and there was actually lots of cool things. I was very impressed when I went there. The coolest thing they had there was the food trucks. I got the best grilled cheese sandwich that I've had in a really long time. I went around and I talked to a lot of the folks that work with Nikola, and they are nice and they were kind and they were willing to sit down and talk to you for as long as you'd like to talk to them. And they were pretty open and honest about things. I didn't ask, is your CEO committing fraud? But in general, I found the people that I talked to, and I never got to talk to Trevor Milton, but the people that I talked to, I found them to be earnest people who really believed in the mission. And I think that's important. I'm going to come back to that. At that event, or sometime around that event, they announced that Anheuser-Busch ordered 800 trucks from Nikola. So pretty good. Things are looking pretty good for Nikola in 2019. Let's jump forward to 2020. Everybody knows 2020 was a garbage year for most everybody. But this is where it really gets ugly for Milton and Nikola. They announced the Nikola Badger in February with a GM partnership, and for some reason the Diesel brothers partnering or helping build it. And the Diesel brothers, not long before that, had gotten into trouble from circumventing some, I can't remember exactly what it was. They circumvented, wasn't the catalytic converter, but it was something like that. And they got into some trouble for doing that, which I thought was an odd pairing, not going to lie. And then Nikola announced that they were going to go public with a SPAC, Special Acquisition Company. And I thought that this was cheating. And I was like, this makes me feel dirty. And then the Hindenburg report comes out. Now, I have issues with the Hindenburg group as a whole, because these are short sellers. So they do all of this research, and I'm sure they dot their I's and cross their T's because they don't want to get sued. But they do all of this research. They short the stock they're doing the research on, and then they disclose that in their report, and then they release the report, and then they make a bunch of money. I don't think that's a very ethical way of doing business. I'm not saying their report is bad. I'm saying that it is in their interest to make things as bad as they could possibly be so that they can make the most amount of money. I'm not down with that. I'm also not down with people in politics owning stocks because it leaves me with a really gross feeling. Anyway, shortly after this, Milton steps down. He denies everything, by the way. He steps down. Nikola's stock falls. GM backs out of their partnership with the Nikola Badger, which is a good thing because they didn't even have a prototype or anything like that. So, not the end of the world. Nikola World 2020 never happened. It was only supposed to be like an elite few that were going to get to go anyway, but it didn't end up happening. And then I think it was in September of 2020, maybe October, Trevor Milton was accused of sexual abuse by at least 2 different women. Both accusers were 15 at the time of the alleged abuse. And I'm going to say alleged here because I don't want to get sued. One was his cousin, and the other was an office assistant for Trevor Milton. At the time of the assaults, he was 17 or 18. I've read 2 different numbers when he assaulted his cousin, or allegedly assaulted his cousin. And he was 22 when he allegedly assaulted his assistant. And this is where I was pretty much done with this guy. Like at this point, I can give people a lot of passes for a lot of things, but I'll say this. I'm pretty much an innocent until proven guilty kind of guy. But Trevor Milton gave me enough reasons to give this enough weight that I was like, I'm going to be done with this guy. This guy's not a person that I would like to follow anymore. In 2021, Nikola Motors admits in the Q4 2020 earnings report, which actually happened in January, that Trevor Milton misled shareholders. Trevor Milton surrenders to the authorities just a few weeks ago. And then Nikola Motors this week came out with an earnings report that beat Wall Street's estimate. So Wall Street had Nikola Motors losing 30 cents per share, but they only really lost 20 cents per share. Now, right now in Coolidge, Arizona, they're building a factory and they're hiring people to work in that factory. And they're going to give those people stock options. And they're going to start building the Nikola tray. I don't have a very high opinion of Trevor Milton. And actually, in earlier drafts of the show notes, I used very ugly adjectives to describe him. But this is a family show, and I'm not interested in getting sued. So here is kind of where I put this. Nikola Motors is still a company. Trevor Milton is out of that company. Punish Trevor Milton if he was guilty, for sure. All of the execs and investors, early investors and advisors and board members who let Trevor Milton get away with these things if he's guilty, punish them. Because this is terrible behavior, and I'm not okay with CEOs getting away with this kind of stuff, or executives in general. Like, you could have an employee that works a cash register that just eats excrement sandwiches all day long, snap at a rude customer and say a swear word, and that employee is fired. But for some reason, executives get to get away with crimes and then get out with a golden parachute. These kind of things make me very angry. But anyway, all of these people who work for Nikola Motors have stock options and or even stock. And they were lied to. They were promised a dream. They quit jobs, in some cases moved from Colorado and Utah, and early employees moved to Arizona. And they don't deserve to be punished for what the executive team, and I'm going to include all of them, for what they've done. All right, let's leave it right there, shall we? Feel like I really brought the show down. I'm recording. It's really hot here in Arizona, and I'm recording in a room without a fan, without a light, and the light's just off because when I started recording it, there was light in the room and then it got dark. So it's hot. So maybe that's part of the mood. I don't know where it came from. Anyway, if you want to email me, it's Bodie, BODIE at 918digital.com. You can find me on Twitter at 918digital. Just a couple quick notes before I let you go. First, Jessica Kirsch, she is kind of on a little bit of a hiatus. She's down at Starbase in Texas, Brownsville area. And right now, she doesn't have great internet. So we are putting the Kirsch rant on hold. But I'm sure she'll be back soon while she figures all this stuff out. She's got a lot of stuff going on. You can go to youtube.com/Jessica Kirsch to see what she's up to. Second, next week, we are going to have Rod Simmons of the SMR podcast on. Now, if you've never heard of the SMR podcast, please go and download it. It is great. You have Rod Simmons, Chris Ashley, and Rob Dunwood. They sit around, they talk about tech, they talk about electric vehicles, and they talk about woodworking and just kind of projects around the home. It's basically if you were just sitting around with a bunch of friends and just kick back and chat around a fire or sitting on a dock by a lake. These are the kind of conversations these fellas have each and every week. And I enjoy it. It's a lot of fun, and I think you should check it out. And I'll put a link in the show notes to the latest episode. All right, with that, I hope everybody has a great week. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you next week.